Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So the big lie, to borrow a phrase, that Jelly Belly Pritzker told in his budget address yesterday is that got a $1.7 billion surplus, we're paying down bills, and we've done it all because of my fiscal belt-tightening, because, of course, that's the only kind of belt-tightening that's possible with him.
Hey-o.
And yet, as we are reminded by Ted Dabrowski over at WirePoints, it was that same Jelly Belly who was begging for federal bailout dollars. There's no chance we won't have to suffer severe damaging cuts to higher ed, to K-12, to basic services that people need if we don't get any support. That's what's going to happen to our state. We're going to see just an enormous hole where we've made so much progress. He warned, this is Tribune reporting, warned that the state faces extraordinarily painful budget cuts if the federal government fails to provide states with relief funding to make up for tax revenue shortfalls caused by efforts to deal with the coronavirus pandemic. His Senate president there, Don Harmon, the communist from Oak Park, asked for $42 billion in aid himself. That triggered the New York Times headline, Illinois seeks a bailout from Congress for pensions and cities. Illinois was the only state in the country to tap the Federal Reserve's municipal liquidity facility twice. This is a joke. $200 billion of federal funding money that flowed into this state under the heading COVID relief.
Which makes me think they needed this pandemic to get bailed out. Illinois and other big Democratic states.
It papers over it for a short time in the short term. But you wouldn't know that to listen to the reactions from the business community, the health community, the education community, the legislative body, the Chicago and Springfield political press corps. This is how gullible they think you are. Tell a friend. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend, Jim Iuorio, who is a Fox business analyst, also a proprietor, restaurant proprietor himself, restaurateur. Branson Palatine is his business. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, guys.
And Jim, are you excited? Because yesterday he announced that restaurants and bars who've been devastated by this pandemic he's going to suspend your state licensing fee for a year. Are you excited?
It's bread and circus. Here's the thing that, just listening to it, how much it makes me sad of how little respect he has for the financial intellect, or intellect in general, of the people in Illinois. Like this notion that when he starts, well, first of all, he said that we would have had a budget surplus regardless of the federal funds, the $200 billion that Dan just mentioned that flowed into our state. But we would have had a surplus even without it because of his great leadership. But then when he talks about suspending the gas tax, doubling the real estate tax credit for 1 year, that happens to be the year of his election. He's not the first to come up with this. This is bread and circus from ancient Rome. Just keep the people a little bit distracted and a little bit fed, and they'll vote you back in. And that's what he believes to be true. So if he's right, wow, like, where does that leave us? Because this is amazing to me. Some of even the suppositions he makes about, and that the left makes in general about taxes, like they say, well, if we up the tax on marijuana, then we'll make this much. No, what you'll do is you'll force other behaviors. I worked on the trading floor for 35 years, and for 10 years, one guy went with a van to Indiana and filled it with cartons of cigarettes, and would come here twice a week and sell them to all the people to avoid the Illinois tax. So I don't know if they don't understand the ramifications of their policies, or they just lie through their teeth. But this is just amazing to me.
And what was your reaction to celebrity chef Rick Bayless saying, we need more restaurant tours in Chicagoland? I'm sure he would expand it to include Palatine. They need more COVID relief if they're going to survive in the era of vax passes and the like.
Well, so I've met Rick Dallas once. I love his restaurants. I'm a fan of his. This is just cowardly, because what he should be saying is that what we need is the government to take the foot off the neck of small business in Illinois for a while and just let us maybe breathe for a second. That's what we really need. Sure, somewhere down the list of things that could save a lot of restaurants would be federal funds. It would work, but it's so ridiculous to start off the conversation asking for that. I want to go back to something a second ago that Amy said too, of how convenient it was, the pandemic and the absolutely economic destruction of the pandemic policies. Is that from the beginning, it was about a month into the pandemic, and Governor Pritzker gave a speech, which subsequently down the line he repeated this 3 different times, where he said, it basically, to paraphrase, it's a shame that this pandemic hit when it did, because we had our finances going great, meaning that he's going to look to the rubble that he created, and go to the federal government hat in hand asking for a bailout, which is exactly what happened. And now we look back, and I just want to remember the convenience, how a wonderful financial thing happened for the state of Illinois that actually ended up saving it because of the restrictions that he put on small businesses and destroyed our economy.
Now, as a restaurant owner, how is the vaccine passport? Is it hurting your business, or is everything the same?
I have not seen in the northwest suburbs, as you guys know, are a little bit different probably than the city, and I will leave it at that. I haven't seen much. I will say that in early January, mid-January, a lot of people were sick. I mean, respiratory viruses happen regardless, and a lot of people. I mean, the restaurant industry was definitely hurt, and the statistics on the Chicago Metro on Open Table about reservations being down 50% is staggering. But in the suburbs, we didn't see it quite as much. I don't think we've definitely seen a pullback in business, but not anything huge.
Well, yeah, but part of this whole discussion from the beginning has, been the nirvana fallacy on steroids, right? Public choice. There's a nirvana fallacy where you're selecting from 2 choices. One is an actual thing, and something and then the other is this impossibility, this utopian. Here's what we could do, or here's what we must demand. Here's what we must accomplish. And so there's never been an honest discussion of trade-offs. Obviously, a respiratory virus as virulent as COVID that created as much sickness and hospitalizations and death is going to have an economic impact. Nobody's disputing that. The question was always trade-offs. And as the assessments roll in, what we find is we made terrible decisions on the trade-off quotient between realistic options, not like a nirvana option versus an actual option, but the actual options that were presented. Lockdowns accomplished nothing on the sickness and death piece of it, Johns Hopkins University being the most recent research team to weigh in. And the devastation was massive and will be felt for a generation to come.
It was a completely break of a Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. And here's the thing, is that people like us, people who are reasonably logical thinkers, I'm not even talking about necessarily the top of the intellectual pyramid, but just reasonably logical, looked and said, wait, lockdown, this is asinine. This thing is already in our country. This is just so stupid. And it was stupid at the beginning, stupid now. And here's one thing that bothers me, and I've been ranting about it on Twitter this morning. Like the Prime Minister of Saskatchewan, that's not really what his title is, but some sort of Canadian official came out and says, we need to look at removing COVID restrictions starting now. No, we don't. We need to look at removing COVID restrictions 1.5 years ago. No, these guys are going to come back now and act like giving us some of our freedoms back. We should be very, very grateful to them. And I'm not going to be part of that. They took away things that they should never have. Even the CDC's own preparedness for a pandemic stated that we would never do things as drastic as a lockdown because of the economic ramifications they had. Thomas Sowell, my favorite economist, one of my favorite quotes is, there are no solutions, there is only trade-offs, and there was no trade-offs that were looked at the beginning. And that's one thing, the television station that I had worked for 15 years, that was one of the beginnings of our problem at the pandemic, is I kept saying, of course there's this virus is something to worry about from a health standpoint. But I do not believe we are considering the ramifications of lockdowns, because there are many, and people die from an economic implosion. And it's a terrible, terrible thing that happened.
Well, and John Hopkins, they had a researcher write a paper talking about lockdowns reduced COVID deaths by 0.2%. So they had little to no public health effects.
And told them that too. All they had to do was ask people who weren't freaked out and panicked, and we would have told them how little efficacy they would have had as well.
Yeah, and by the way, your former employer, CNBC, and these smarmy pseudo-intellects like Andrew Ross Sorkin, and so many of the bigwigs that appear on the investotainment shows, and just like what we see in the C-suites in Chicago, they have also afforded themselves horribly as a class over the last 2 years.
Well, there's no question about it. And one of the most famous people from CNBC talking about how the military should be rounding up people to force vaccinations into people's arms. I don't think when people realize, when they're talking about, there should be mandatory vaccinations, I don't think they understand the ramifications of that progression. Like, if people I know who are very, very anti and against this will dig their heels in, what are you saying exactly? Are you saying we are going to be breaking down doors and pulling people out and roughing them and cuffing them and sending them to a place? Because, that's where it ends when you're saying, well, I think everyone should have a mandatory vaccine. So, and that, CNBC was a big pusher of that, and there's just too many things that we disagreed on, let's say.
Yeah, and those COVIDians have done a real trick in convincing, unfortunately, a lot more Americans that you were mentioning rights before, that our rights are derived from our government. So, to the extent that they restrict them and then they provide some of them back, then, that's just the give and take of being a citizen, because our rights come from our temporary representatives. And that's a paradigm shift if it sticks, and a terrible one.
That's what we got to fight about the most. When people act like, oh gosh, isn't it so good to be able to go in a restaurant without a mask anymore? No, let's remember who did that to you and why they did it. Not because they had any science to back it up, despite the fact they pretended they did. They just were in a panic, and they were thinking we might as well do something. And then they liked having the power. I'm not going to be thanking anybody. I know that as serfs we're supposed to, but I'm not going to be thanking anybody, guaranteed.
I know. It's so ridiculous. I mean, and think about it. We've been masked the past 20 months out of the past 24 months. And there's no one has any metrics in place to take the exit ramp. No one can tell me anything, or any reporters.
But they're going to solve climate change. They can't tell us if a cloth mask actually works or not, but they're going to solve climate change with $130 trillion over the next 10 years as well. So, again, if someone comes out of this 2 years and say the answer to this is that government doesn't have enough power, then I can't help them. We don't have anything more to talk about, because this has been just a glaring piece of evidence.
Before we let you go, a markets question. So, pretty rough January. Seems to be a better February so far. Where are you in terms of tech stocks and sort of the NASDAQ being in the correction zone? Does that get worse short term? And add a comment or two about crypto in there as well.
So I don't think it gets worse short term. Stocks had to adjust to a new interest rate environment, and tech stocks are affected disproportionately most to higher rates, because they're valued on these future discounted revenue stream model. But anyway, the point is that NVIDIA lost 40% of its value. Netflix lost 50% of its value. Amazon lost 28%. Now, Google and Apple and Facebook, as obviously we've seen from last night, just got absolutely caned. So what I'm saying is that there was a lot of excess built up in tech stocks, and I think a lot of it's worked off in the 16 to 18% correction that we've seen already. I think it's going to be volatile both ways, but I don't think we're in for any sort of huge just pummeling. I think that the notion that the Fed is going to hike 7 times in 2022 is ridiculous, and I think we're going to start walking that back a little bit, just because the macroeconomic condition is not solid enough for the Fed to just completely start hiking rates. And to underscore that, they're still buying bonds to keep long-end rates compressed, even though they're talking tough like they want rates to go higher. So I think we're okay. I think we're going to have volatility, but I don't think it's going to be the big one in the stock market.
And Kath, and what about crypto? Are we still supposed to believe Kathy Wood over at ARK Investments that Bitcoin's going to 500,000?
No, well, I am a crypto investor, but it's a very small amount, and it's not. I don't actually trade it. If it was going to be a dollar hedge, and if it was going to be a commentary on poor stewardship of our currency, then sign me up because I believe in all those things. But what's weird about Bitcoin is it was supposed to be this non-correlated asset with the stock market, and all of a sudden, all these huge trading desks with huge positions started trading Bitcoin and Ethereum as if it was a tech stock as far as that same risk profile. So now they all correlate and move together. I think it's good in the short term because I think the people who are investing in crypto have to remember and realize that there's huge risks when talking about an immature product like this, routinely 30 to 40% swings. I am still mildly pro cryptocurrency because I'm very anti the way government treats our currency. So I'm still for it. Still, every week I put a certain amount in, and I'm going to stop when it gets to be 1 to 2% of my total net investment. Which, by the way, if it keeps going down, that'll be forever. That takes, but we're trying.
He is Jim Iuorio, Fox Business analyst and proprietor of Brant's Restaurant in Palatine as well. Jim, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Don't miss the 2022 Tinley Park Golf Show, February 4th through the 6th at the Tinley Park Convention Center. Enjoy a true golfing experience with driving range demo area with reps from Callaway, Wilson, Tour Edge, Cleveland, Cobra, and Mizuno. Compete in the skills competition for the longest drive in both ladies and men's division, as well as the long putt. Top 10 in each category will be invited to the sudden death final on Sunday to compete for a cash prize of $500 in each challenge. Browse aisles of newly released equipment and apparel by Chicagoland's top retailers at the 2022 Tinley Park Golf Show. Plus, check out the live telecast of the AT&T Pro-Am at the local one, 19th hole, sponsored by the Oak Terrace Resort. The 2022 Tinley Park Golf Show, February 4th through the 6th. Show hours are Friday noon to 7.